Wally West was dying, not in body, but in spirit. Each beat of his heart echoed like a hollow thunderclap across a world he no longer recognized. Time had betrayed him. The Speed Force, once his home and sanctuary, had twisted his life into a cruel spiral, erasing his children, distorting his past, and pushing him into the darkest recesses of guilt. After Heroes in Crisis, after the deaths, after the Mobius chair, after losing everything that made Wally West, he ran. Not as a hero, not as a savior, but as a ghost, screaming across the lightning veins of Earth's timelines, hoping one would consume him. On one such run, fleeing from his own thoughts after an explosive encounter with a time-duplicating villain called Dr. Double X, Wally lost control. The feedback from the villain's unstable radiation tore a rift in localized space-time, spitting Wally out like a broken bullet. He crash-landed in the middle of a desert, unmarked, uncharted, and thrumming with faint, residual energy. It was a LexCorp black site, long abandoned, but not forgotten. As Wally caught his breath, eyes still sparking with disorientation, gunfire erupted from inside the facility. The chaos was surgical. Breach charges, Kryptonian railguns, energy weapons from another world. Inside, 4 individuals were tearing the place apart. The Outlaws. Jason Todd Red Hood moved like a wraith, twin pistols hammering precision shots into the guards. Artemis, goddess turned warrior, cleaved through armor with a bow forged of divine steel. Bizarro, the cloned echo of Superman, roared as he lifted a burning tank and crushed it like paper. And flanking them, to Wally's astonishment, was Roy Harper, Arsenal. The prodigal archer returned to life through time's strange mercy. For a moment, Wally almost ran, but then he saw the flash of a speed siphon grenade clutched in a dying mercenary's hand, aimed at Artemis. In the blink between seconds, Wally moved. Time slowed to a crawl. The world blurred into blue and amber. He tore the grenade from the soldier's hand, disassembled it midair, shattered the shrapnel in a perfect arc around the room, and stood between Artemis and a volley of incoming fire. When time snapped back into motion, only one figure remained standing in the aftermath. The fallen Flash, his aura pulsing like a dying star. The Outlaws turned, weapons raised, confused, ready. Jason Todd was the first to lower his gun. "Well," he said dryly, "looks like we've got a red stray." Wally didn't respond. His breathing was ragged. His hands shook from the weight of his own speed. Roy stepped forward, surprise widening his eyes. Wally? Wally turned to him, but the name barely registered. He hadn't heard it in weeks, maybe longer. "You're supposed to be dead," Roy said softly. Wally chuckled bitterly. "So are you." The tension in the air never quite dissipated. Artemis sized him up. Bizarro tilted his head with a frown. Jason Todd holstered his pistol and approached. "You here to stop us?" he asked. "No." "Here to judge us?" "Not today." Jason stared into him. There was no light in Wally's eyes, only weight. "Then maybe you're just like us after all." Wally didn't flinch. Jason continued. "You're a man who lost everything. You ran fast and it still caught up with you. We don't do masks here, Wally. No sunshine speeches, no league rules. You want to be useful. Help us finish this mission." "What mission?" Jason pointed at the crates stacked high against the walls, each one glowing faintly blue. "Alien tech, time-displaced weapons, speed force enhancement rigs, lethal if activated." "We're burning this ring down," Roy said. "Black market war tech. Stuff that makes the Suicide Squad look like mall cops. Thought you might want in." Wally hesitated. He could feel it. The old instincts. The voice of Barry Allen. The ghost of Superman. The justice inside him that once believed in right and wrong. But that voice had grown faint. And in the brutal clarity of this desert, Jason's voice rang louder. "You want to suffer quietly for the rest of your life," Jason said. "Go back to the League. You want to fight the monsters who profit from the chaos you left behind? Stick with us." Wally said nothing, but when the Outlaws moved to the next compound, he was already there waiting for the doors to open. Days passed like seconds. Seconds dragged like years. Time meant little to Wally West now. With the Outlaws, it wasn't measured by calendars or clocks, only missions, bloodstains, and the ghosts that clung tighter after each job. Their campaign against the interdimensional arms ring had expanded rapidly, revealing a terrifying web of black market dealings that stretched from Earth's forgotten corners to the unstable edges of the multiverse. Kryptonian artillery, doomsday gene samples, speed force amplifiers extracted from dying timelines, and at the center of it all, Amanda Waller. Or a version of her operating in the shadows beyond even Task Force X's jurisdiction. She wasn't just controlling the board, she was rewriting it. Wally was changing. It wasn't immediate, not a switch flipped, but a slow corrosion of everything that once made him who he was. On a mission in Kurak, he blitzed through an entire base in under a second, leaving every guard paralyzed but alive. The next time, he didn't leave them breathing. They were armed. They were traffickers. They were planning to sell Speed Force-infused heart implants to dictators. But still, it was a line he once never would have crossed. Jason didn't call him out. Neither did Artemis. But Roy, he noticed. Wally didn't flinch when asked about it. "They would have sold time to monsters," he said. "I just saved time the trouble." Bizarro, strangely enough, was the one Wally confided in the most. The backward Superman. The failed imitation of a god who just wanted to do good. The two of them would sit in silence after raids, staring at fractured horizon lines. Sometimes Bizarro would fumble his words, saying, "You not broken," when he meant "you are." And Wally would laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was the closest thing he had to comfort. Bizarro didn't pretend Wally was whole. He didn't demand redemption. He just existed with him. And in those quiet moments, Wally felt seen. Their next target brought the darkness even closer. A secret facility buried under Markovia, where Waller's rogue scientists were experimenting with Mobius tech. Fragments of the chair that once gave Wally godlike omniscience. The sight of it made him tremble. He didn't tell the others why. Jason just thought Wally was angry. Roy suspected more. Artemis kept her distance. She didn't trust this new version of the Flash. She respected him, yes, but there was no warmth in her eyes, only calculation. One night she told Jason, "He's not running from something. He's running toward it, toward an edge." The mission was brutal. The enemy had speedsters of their own, twisted mirror clones of Wally, created from corrupted tachyon splices. They weren't fast enough. Wally tore them apart mid-step, phasing through their bodies and scrambling their molecules before they could react. Jason vomited after seeing one of the kills. Bizarro said nothing. Roy grabbed Wally's arm after the battle, demanding to know if this was what he wanted, to become a legend of fear instead of hope. Wally stared back, eyes glowing like dying suns. There's no hope in the trenches, only survival. It wasn't all loss. Wally's brilliance in battle, his near-infinite processing speed, his unmatched kinetic control. It made the Outlaws unstoppable. Their reputation grew. Black Mask's empire collapsed after Wally erased all his offshore accounts in milliseconds. A group of star-possessed cultists in Africa had their minds cleansed after Wally vibrated the parasites out of phase. He dismantled an alien siege ship over Kurak before it breached the atmosphere, scattering the wreckage like stardust. Jason called him our Red God. Wally didn't laugh at the title. He just nodded. And yet, in the shadows of their victories, something darker stirred. Wally found data inside the Markovia site, encrypted files showing Waller's real plan. She wasn't just stockpiling weaponized timelines. She was building a Mobius engine, a prototype designed to stabilize fractured realities, and let her choose which timeline became dominant. A multiversal scalpel, a god machine. And it required one key component to function, a living speedster with a broken tether to time. Someone who had lived and died. Someone like Wally. He said nothing to the team. Not yet. But the thought burrowed in his mind like a virus. This machine. It could fix things. It could undo the death at Sanctuary. The children he lost. The years erased. The temptation bled into his veins like static. He told himself it was about stopping Waller, about justice. But part of him, a part he hadn't heard in a long time, whispered, "You could go back." Artemis caught him staring at the schematics late one night, his fingers twitching. She didn't scold him. She just placed her axe beside him and said, "Whatever you do next, make sure it's you doing it. Not the part of you that still wants to be a ghost." Wally didn't respond. The Mobius engine pulsed on the screen before him, like a heartbeat he thought he'd buried. The desert wind screamed across the hidden canyon base. In Kurak, where Amanda Waller's Mobius engine pulsed with chaotic rhythm deep underground. A mechanical heart made from the fractured spine of reality itself. The Outlaws stood at the edge of this nightmare, each bearing scars not just of battle, but of the years spent walking the gray line between justice and survival. But for Wally West, this moment was different. This wasn't just about stopping a villain or protecting the world. This was about confronting every lie he'd told himself since the moment he came back from death. The past he wanted to erase, the future he feared to face, and the broken present he'd tried to outrun. Inside the base, the engine flared with unstable Speed Force energy, stolen from Wally himself through nanite siphons, bleeding his vibrations into a quantum battery. At its center stood Reverse Flash, not the one Wally had grown to hate, but a darker variant, displaced from a dying timeline, where Wally had become the destroyer of worlds. This version of Thawne wore a grin stitched with malice, laced with irony. "How poetic," he taunted. "You helped them build their salvation, Wally, and now they'll use it to prune you." Roy Harper gritted his teeth, notching a kryptonite-tipped arrow. Artemis stood by his side, blades drawn, while Bizarro floated overhead like a fallen god. Jason stood closest to Wally, his helmet off, red domino mask damp with sweat. "This ends today," Jason growled, one way or another. The ensuing battle was cataclysmic. Thawne moved at speeds that warped gravity. Bizarro slammed into him, only to be thrown through 6 concrete walls. Artemis nearly lost a leg in a trap of decaying chronal duplicates. Roy was impaled by one of his own explosive bolts, reflected at the speed of light. But Wally wasn't holding back. The time for restraint was over. He met Thawne blow for blow, vibrating through attacks, siphoning Speed Force energy directly from the core of the engine, turning the room into a red inferno of lightning and death. "Do it," Thawne screamed, bleeding from the mouth. "You want to fix everything? Use the engine. Rewrite your pain. Save your kids. Bring them all back." Wally stood over him, his face cracked with emotion. Tears streamed down as his fist trembled. "That's not what heroes do," he whispered. "Not anymore." Instead of activating the Mobius engine, Wally overloaded it, pouring every ounce of raw Speed Force energy into the core, destabilizing the tether to time, The explosion ripped reality like paper, but Wally shielded his teammates in a kinetic cocoon of vibrating molecules, holding time itself still for them. They lived. The engine died. And Thawne disintegrated into dust, a man finally erased by the very force he abused. The base was gone. So was the last temptation. After the silence, Wally sat alone on a dune, as the sunrise painted Kurak's sands blood red. He watched Roy limp toward him, bandaged and tired but alive. "So what now?" Roy asked, sitting beside him. "You going back to Keystone? Flash Tower, League stuff?" Wally didn't answer right away. He turned the communicator Jason had given him over in his palm. The same one he never once turned off. "You know," he said finally, "for the first time in a long time, I don't want to run." Jason approached from behind, placing a battered leather jacket beside him. Dark red, with a lightning bolt patch stitched into the shoulder. "Then stay," he said. "You're one of us now. You've always been." Wally looked at them all. Roy, Artemis, Bizarro, Jason, a team of misfits, survivors. Not symbols, not icons, but people who'd stared into the abyss and decided to build something anyway. He stood, pulling on the jacket. It didn't fit perfectly. Neither did he, but it was close enough. "You guys already have a red hood," Wally said with a smirk. "Guess I'll be Red Lightning." Artemis rolled her eyes. "That's the dumbest name I've ever heard." Bizarro smiled. "It am best name ever." They laughed. Wally laughed too. Not the forced chuckle of someone pretending to be okay, but real laughter. Warm, human. And as they walked into the rising sun, not heroes, not villains, just outlaws, the world felt a little more bearable again.